Zoe Lister-Jones, you appeared this season in a couple of projects. You're in the comedy series Life in Pieces on CBS, and you were in the film Confirmation on HBO. First off, congratulations on Life in Pieces, which recently the news came down that it was renewed for a second season. That must have been exciting news.
It was very exciting. Yeah, yeah. My co-star came over and we danced to Beyonce for a good hour.
That's the way to celebrate to anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Beyonce is always there for you in times of celebration and in despair.
Clearly, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
she's written a soundtrack for either.
that's right.
You've done a lot of TV over the years, from guest appearances, and you've had other series regular roles before this. But how did this particular opportunity for Life in Pieces come about?
Well, the executive producer of Life in Pieces, Aaron Kaplan, also executive produced this other series that I was on called Friends with Better Lives, also on CBS, and so we had a great working relationship. And he came to me with Life in Pieces and said, "You got to do this. It's an incredible script, an incredible creator." And Justin Adler and Jason Weiner was directing, and so it was this kind of great dream team. And he was like, "And Colin Hanks is attached to play your husband," and it was an opportunity that just it had all the right pieces, and so so to speak. And so yeah, I just went in and it was a great meeting, and it was kind of kismet because I think it is rare for so many elements to be in place and to feel that right.
And speaking of Dream Team, I mean, you've got, in addition to Colin Hanks as your husband on the show, you've got Diane Wiest and James Brolin and Thomas Sadoski, among other co-stars in
Yeah.
this big ensemble. Is that an especially exciting cast to get to work with?
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I mean, Diane Wiest is such an icon. I mean, for the world, but for me personally, being a native New Yorker and growing up on Woody Allen films, it's just I still pinch myself that I get to show up at work and like act opposite her and just like hang out with her in the makeup trailer um, and everyone. I think we have really become such a family, both on and off set. I think everyone is just a really kind-hearted and generous person, and that is also really rare, I think. And so it's a really lovely group of people whose work I've admired for a long time, and now I get to admire them as humans.
Your most frequent scene partner, of course, is Colin Hanks as your husband. What's it like working with him?
It's awesome. I mean, I get asked that a lot, obviously, and I don't have like a better answer than just saying it's like the best thing ever. He's become a very close friend and is an amazing scene partner, and we just have a blast both on and off set.
And on the show, when it started, your characters were becoming new parents, and we see pregnancy and childbirth storylines on TV, from time to time. But in this case, your character is actually introduced to the audience. First episode, your first scene is her giving birth.
Yeah.
Was it interesting to introduce this character at already such an intense turning point in her life?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what kind of drew me to the role, to be honest, was that I mean, the pilot episode of Jen and Greg's story was so ballsy. I mean, to really just like start in the throes of labor, defecating on a table, and then having to deal with like Colin sticking a frozen glove up my hoo-ha. It was like it was hilarious and very real and very raw. And I thought for network television was pushing a lot of amazing boundaries and continues to do so. I think it's a really relatable character for so many women, in this country and around the world who are dealing with similar issues of what it means to have your first child and to really see the nitty gritty and behind the scenes of what that means rather than the kind of picture perfect cookie cutter life that we often see on screen.
And it's interesting, since we started the show with the childbirth, we didn't get to see that whole pregnancy process, but at the end of the season we find out that your character is pregnant again. So are you excited about getting to sort of explore that now with the character?
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun. I mean, I'm excited because I can eat whatever I want as an actress. So that's a great opportunity for me. No, I think that in this, along the lines of how they explored the aftermath of having your first child, I think now getting to explore the intricacies of pregnancy will be a lot of fun, and equally as specific, and hopefully will also push some boundaries.
And also at the end of the season, it must be quite a different experience because I mean, when you start a new show, it's a new cast, it's a new character, new people you're working with, and then by the end, you've had a chance to settle in. So did the end of the season feel especially different from getting the show started?
Oh yeah. I think we all quite luckily became very close very quickly. But of course, the more hours you log with the same people, you just become that much more intimate, and so leaving was really painful. And especially when you don't know necessarily if a show is coming back, it's like, oh my gosh, is this the last time that we're gonna all be able to be this family? And luckily it wasn't, and we all get to come back and still hang out together. But yeah, I mean, it's really interesting as a person and as an actor to go through that arc of starting somewhere and having to like be like, hi Colin, nice to meet you, here's my hoo-ha, and then by the end, like just knowing kind of everything about each other. And I think especially because of the nature of this show, it's 4 short stories every week. The majority of my work is with Colin, and when you're on other shows, it's a much more, even though it's a large ensemble, you get to really be with different characters and different actors all the time. But I think because of this show, you get really close with your immediate co-star because you are doing these kind of intensified short stories every week. So it's been a really fun experience for that reason.
And that is a unique format the show has, telling those, 4 little short stories in every episode. How does that, compare just, from an acting standpoint, from a production standpoint, to other, TV work you've done?
Well, it's great from a human standpoint because I only work like 2 to 3 days a week. um, From an acting standpoint, it's also pretty cool. I did a lot of multi-camera sitcoms before with Whitney. I did 2 seasons on Whitney, and then Friends with Better Lives, and that's very much like theater because you are performing in front of a live audience. I think with Life in Pieces, it's a single camera, which means there is no audience. But because we're shooting these 4 short stories, you do still kind of get to act it as though it's a play, because you are shooting your character's arc in this condensed manner. So it's not like on Monday we show up and shoot one scene, and then on Wednesday we show up and shoot another scene. It's like you really are shooting this, storyline in a, not chronologically, but I think in a way that really helps the acting and the authenticity and the intimacy that we're trying to create among our characters.
Now, and on any show on network television with 22 episode seasons, you're working with any number of writers and directors, and one of the interesting things is this season one of your directors was Helen Hunt, who is an actress, of course, and
Yeah.
and she's done directing work on just a handful of TV shows, including her own Mad About You. So what was it like having her come on and direct an episode?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, I have been a fan of hers forever. I loved Mad About You, and of course all of her film work. And having female directors, I think, is always a wonderful thing, and the more female directors we can get, the better. But I think to have a female director who comes from the acting world and really knows how to talk to actors and approaches it with both hats on, so to speak, was really exciting. And she's just such a wonderful person. It was a total joy to have her on set.
Switching gears to your other major role this season on Confirmation. It's a completely different kind of project, obviously. It's the tells the story of the sexual harassment allegations against Clarence Thomas, who was being considered for the Supreme Court and was, of course, eventually appointed.
Mhm.
play an advisor to Joe Biden in this film, who's played by Greg Kinnear. Is that role based on a real character, or is it a composite, or was it created for the film?
Yeah, it's a composite of characters. I think the goal in Rick Famuyiwa's vision of the film and Susanna Grant's vision of the film was to really see the behind the scenes machinations of what this confirmation hearing process was like. I think it was such a salacious moment in history. It was really the first, it was kind of the advent of the 24-hour news cycle. And because Anita Hill's testimony was kind of so salacious in terms of what she was talking about, that I think the sound bites have resonated throughout history, the pubic hair on the Coke can and all of these things. But I think that that they, as history has progressed, the kind of real nature of what this confirmation hearing and her testimony brought to light, and how it shifted a paradigm in this country around sexual harassment and gender equity, has kind of been lost. And so I think my character really just took us behind the scenes to see all of the politics in what was going on during that hearing process, and kind of how it unfolded and why it unfolded in the way that it did.
And it's hard to believe that, I mean, this event, these hearings happened 25 years ago. Were you familiar with it? A lot of it at how conscious of it were you at the time, and how much did you learn later, and how familiar were you when you actually went into this project?
Yeah, I actually have a very vivid memory of watching Anita Hill's testimony on television with my mom. I was 9 when it happened in 91. And I think obviously because children are sponges and kind of hypersensitive to what their parents are feeling, I was really sensitive to my mom's focus on this particular hearing. And I was like, why is this such a big deal? And so I think as a kid, I was really honed in on trying to understand what Anita Hill meant, and why my mom was so invested in her story. And so it has actually stuck with me throughout my life, because I have, through my mother's lens, I think, been able to always recall her as kind of an unsung hero in this country. But that being said, I didn't know a lot of the details of what was going on behind the scenes, and I didn't remember a lot of the details even in front of the camera. And so to be reminded of that and to do my own research in preparing for the film was amazing, because I think so many of the issues that this film grapples with are issues that we are still faced with as a nation, that intersection of race and gender politics. And obviously with the passing of Justice Scalia, the timeliness of the film talking about confirmation hearings and kind of how we deal with that politically in this country, and can cross the line, is something that obviously is also super relevant. So it was an amazing film to be a part of, I think, especially at this moment in history.
The film does take such a behind-the-scenes look at the event. During your research and preparation, did you have a chance to talk to anyone who was behind the scenes, or any insiders who did sort of have a behind-the-scenes look at what was going on?
Yeah, I mean, we read a lot of books, and we spoke to a number of journalists who were covering the hearings at the time. So they were kind of our advisors if we had questions. But I think, for me as an actor, as much of the research as I could do, it was more important, I think, at a certain point, to just try and enter the shoes of my character, who I think is a conflicted character. And so I think to try and really explore the ins and outs of what her motivating factors were was kind of where I took it once we were in production, rather than getting into the nitty-gritty of the fact-based history, even though that's obviously very much informed my character's decisions. I think because she yeah, her role in the process is a complicated one. So I was grappling with that as a feminist, just like what her role is as a woman in this process, and obviously for no spoiler alerts, but I think her arc in the film and her revealing kind of where she was at by the end is something that's really powerful to me.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about that last the scene between you and Grace Gummer,
Yeah,
and not to give it away exactly where your character lands, but that question of who do you believe, especially
yeah.
these two women who are working in government, themselves in this largely male dominated world. What was how did that feel to you, like, significantly? Like, what did that feel like a particularly significant moment for not just the character, but in terms of the themes of what the story is about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's my favorite scene in the film, probably for me, that I got to perform in. I think that for women in male-dominated industries, which is something that we still face, um, it's a really complicated world to navigate, and I think that what my character kind of um, is representative of is a woman who is trying to play by the rules that have been set and kind of institutionalized by a pretty patriarchal society, and so I think that is the line that so many professional women walk, which is, how much do I have to play by these rules in order to move ahead so that maybe I can affect change once I inherit some of this power? Or do I try and subvert these rules early at the risk of losing, my opportunities to climb the ladder? And I think that is a really difficult decision, for anyone who's marginalized, whether it's, racially or in terms of gender or sexual preference or any of, these paradigms, that I think it's a big question about when to use your voice and when not to.
It is a really complicated question, especially when you're at a disadvantage as women are in many areas, in many industries, and in government in a lot of ways. Is that compromise? You're always asking yourself that question: is like, do I get ahead first, or do I make a difference first? And sort of where it's sort of the goalposts keep moving.
Yeah, and how I think obviously it's a personal question that everyone has to ask, but I think at a certain point, if you've played by the rules long enough, one might be at risk of internalizing them and actually, believing them. And I think that is a struggle. And I think Anita Hill faced a similar struggle when she was faced with whether or not to testify, because I think she understood that this had really dangerous consequences for her personally, and that she wouldn't be seen as a hero, that her raising her voice in this situation would probably only target her and villainize her more than affect change, which unfortunately it did.
Now, in addition to your work as an actor, you're also a writer, and you've written roles for yourself in film and on stage. Does that other side of your creativity make you even more creatively engaged in the acting work you do, like in Life in Pieces or Confirmation, like even when it's material that you haven't yourself written?
Totally, yeah. I mean, I think I think being on the other side of the camera definitely is humbling as an actor, because I think to understand what goes into making a production, it's just such an overwhelming process. And so I think as actors, we can get kind of myopic about our role. And I think it's the biggest lesson that it teaches me is always just about gratitude and approaching the craft in a way that really takes in everyone's role and is appreciative of everyone's role, so that we can all really just be a team and try and just make everyone's life as easy as possible.
Well, I want to congratulate you again on Life in Pieces coming back for a second season, and Confirmation, which is has gotten great reviews and buzz for that one. So thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been great talking to you.